And I wrote this together. I've been friends with John for 23 years.
I've been friends with John for nearly a quarter of a century, if not a bit more.
You know John is the master chef, lover of fine drink, paintball, video war games, and definitely purveyor of witty one-liners. But for JD and I thinking about how to toast John, it occurred to us that we were dealing with much more than the public persona of John. In fact, when we thought about the times we shared with John, we realized, it came to us, that the man we were toasting is actually the original, most interesting man in the world. Or as Winston Churchill said of Russia, John is a riddle, wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma, but perhaps there is a key.
There's the John that convinced us to drive golf balls off the North Rim in Upper Park with him on an otherwise lazy Sunday.
The John that was arrested for tagging socially conscious messages of consume less on Chico municipal public property.
The John that came up with the idea of creating picnic table sculptures in Chico High School quad, leading to comments the next morning from our classmates who had no idea why 7 picnic tables were stacked upon each other in crop circle formation. And aliens had invaded our school.
Even at this early age, we had a suspicion that our bespectacled friend that we called Weird was in fact the most interesting man in the world. So interesting that even his high school woodshop nemesis listed him as an emergency contact phone number.
Ice. Later, we were convinced of that fact when John produced the hit of Chico High that was Star Trek on the Quad. Star Trek on the Quad days, or at least the hit in our minds.
John, of course, then outdid himself by wearing a kilt to prom. Mind you, John was a stud in high school, and he became a serial prom date. So in fact, he wore a kilt to 3 proms. His personality was so magnetic that instead of asking 3 girls to prom, 3 girls asked him.
And if that wasn't impressive enough, these were the days before the internet, where he managed to order his old clan Charton kilt from Scotland without the help of Google.
John followed up that impressive act by convincing the entire Challenge of the Minds team to wear postman shirts, only to outdo himself by then making a movie about it entitled No Return Address. Some of the co-stars of which are in the audience! Darcy and Richard.
I think it's safe to say that by our senior year in high school, we had become increasingly aware that our friend, John, was in fact the most interesting man in the world.
But John was actually too interesting for high school. So interesting that he decided to drop out. Why did he decide to drop out? So he could rent books from the library and read more. John was indeed the real-life example of the theoretical kid that everyone claims to know but no one really does. The kid who is literally too smart for school.
It was only later that John turned into the mad bilingual chef, the man whose brisket tacos led to his reputation expanding faster than the known universe.
He drank Laotian rice whiskey from a goat horn. I have the pictures to prove that.
He gambled on cockfights in 3 Southeast Asian countries. Again, we have the pictures.
He tutored his less experienced friends in how to pick up high school girls. Wait, that was while we were in high school. Yeah. Just to be clear. John also base jumped from a crane next to the Golden Gate Bridge, and then burned out my old Nissan Sentra on the Bay Bridge, and left it there, even though it had never once broken in 20 years before then.
The car was still there. One time in a random Thai village, John had an awkward moment, just to see what it would feel like. Rafi and I had to take a step back, realizing fully that we were merely standing in the shadow of John's greatness, for he was the most interesting man in the world.
This was certainly true when John led us on a machine gun tour of Cambodia.
And when during that same trip, he showed that he could sleep like a baby, not just on the bumpiest bus ride in the world on the way to ancient Angkor Wat ruins. This was only to be outdone by the totally sound sleep John fell into while the rest of us were peeing our pants with fear during a harrowing speedboat ride up the Cambodian leg of the Mekong River to the Laotian border. He slept like a baby.
While the rest of us sat white-knuckled, gripping each other and saying our prayers, John dozed off comfortably in the front seat, only to awaken and ask nonchalantly upon our arrival, "Are we here?"
In Bangkok, John created the comic book character, The Deserter, a fictional ex-army logistics officer that goes rogue in Southeast Asia. Of course, in John's case, this was semi-autobiographical.
Finally, when the California DMV recently listed his beard on his organ donation card, we were thoroughly convinced that we were lucky enough to be friends with the most interesting man in the world.
In past years, we've noticed a change in our friend. The most interesting man in the world has continued his most interesting exploits, but John has found the key to unlock his true happiness. John has found his most interesting counterpart.
John and Naomi first met when John was 17 and Naomi was 12. Just saying. Even then, John was taken by the precocious 12-year-old, recruiting her for the Chico High Challenge of the Minds team, which she then joined when it was time. And won. With people in this room.
It would be wrong to say that Naomi has tamed John. Rather, in Naomi, John has found the only woman in the world who can match his most interesting exploits step for step.
A woman who appreciates a fine brisket taco, long drinking nights in random Croatian bars, and unnecessarily long polysyllabic words.
And while Naomi may not condone cockfighting, she can appreciate John's desire to bet on random cocks.
We just had to. And so to John and Naomi, the most interesting couple in the world, please join us in raising a glass and toast.